Welcome everyone. My name is Chelsea Alberico, and welcome to our HR in the Time of COVID Eccles Alumni Forum. Thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat and let us know where you are tuning in from. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, OC Tanner. I am now going to turn our time over to our moderator, Debora Owens.
Thank you, Chelsea. All right, sorry about that. Thank you, Chelsea. I'm the Associate Director of Corporate Outreach and part-time MBA placement for Business Career Services at the Eccles School of Business. I am so excited to have our presenters here, Mindi and Alex from OC Tanner. Interestingly, as part of my role in corporate outreach, I had the pleasure of engaging with OC Tanner last year. I had a tour of the space, learned a little bit about the company's rich history in this area, its evolution, and quite frankly, its transformation, because it has transformed as a company. It's a great organization, and I'm excited to moderate this conversation today on the topic of HR in the time of COVID. I doubt any one of us had any idea we'd still be here, 10, 11 months later in this pandemic and in this crisis mode. Organizations across industries have been impacted, some positively, but most or many in a negative way. So as people, we've had to adjust. We've had to think differently. We're having to live and work differently. And so OC Tanner is in the business of people. And we're thrilled to hear the perspectives and insights on this topic. I'm going to give a brief just introduction to both Mindi and Alex, but I'll turn it over to them and let them give you a little bit more background. Mindi Cox is Senior VP of People and Great Work, which is a great title. I love it. She has nearly 20 years experience in the industry, and she comes to us with a perspective much more from a practical point of view. Mindi is a Ute, U of U alumni, both from a bachelor's in journalism and an MBA. Dr. Alex Lovell is Director of Research and Data Science at OC Tanner. He's a political sociologist, and he's going to come at this from a much broader perspective based on his experience and what he does. He's also an alum of the U, yay, received his Ph.D. in political science. So now I will turn it over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Deborah. We are thrilled to be here today, not only because it's our alma mater, but because this is one of our favorite topics. Helping companies help their people thrive has been our purpose in the world for almost 100 years now. And for those of you who know OC Tanner, many who are local may associate that name with our jewelry store downtown, where you may have celebrated a significant life event or at least a great gift or two. That is part of our story, but it's more of a hobby business when compared to our main, our core business, which is culture, which is helping employers establish a company culture where their people can come and thrive. And we do that through the lens of appreciation and recognition. We have, as you mentioned, evolved from purely a manufacturing company who manufactured symbols of achievement for companies to gift to employees to more of a software as a service organization where we have platforms that companies will brand and introduce into their corporate environments so that employees can use that to recognize each other, celebrate great work, applaud accomplishments, align to strategy. And so that has been an evolution for us, but we're still very much a hybrid organization. So just to give you a sense of the workforce that Alex and I are both a part of, but also that we've been mindful of and getting through this very unusual year. We have a global workforce. We have 6 locations across the world in India and Australia, Singapore, the UK, Canada, the US. We also have several sales offices throughout the United States and globally. So we have people all over the globe. And this is probably, I would say, the first event, right, that has extended for quite a period of time where we have all been affected similarly. And, usually if there's a crisis in one country or a natural disaster in another, or something that's just out of the control of the business, we're sort of supporting one of our units or really trying to get one location of the business through that. But this has been everywhere, which has just been quite surprisingly unifying for us as we experience this in different ways, but also in very similar ways. We also have a diverse workforce in the fact that although we have a strong manufacturing and distribution supply chain oriented workforce, and that remains true, we also have a growing contingent of knowledge workers, office workers, IT, and a growing marketing and research team, which Alex is a part of. So this hybrid and this globalization has been such an interesting mix to be in the middle of as we try and be mindful of how best to take care of our people. And I think that's one of the things that's been the most fascinating about the research that Alex and his team have done, is the effect of this current environment and how it is experienced both very similarly across the globe and across work types, but also with the nuanced differences that we ought to be mindful of as people leaders. Alex, I don't know if you want to add anything to that little bit of an introduction.
I think that's a perfect introduction to OC Tanner, just to give everybody a sense of where I am in the organization. As Mindi mentioned, I'm part of the OC Tanner Institute. I lead our research department and growing team. We work within our product teams as well as with clients and HR stakeholders across the world. So as Mindi brings a really wonderful kind of perspective from a practitioner perspective, I bring a little bit of a different perspective, more from a research and more general background. So very excited to be here. Thanks for taking a few minutes to join us today.
So we've had, as we opened up this event, we had people submit some questions. And I'd like to kind of make sure that we do address all of these questions, and they've been basically grouped under 4 main topics. So the role of HR, productivity and leadership, onboarding, and then kind of the future of returning to work. What's going to happen? What's post-COVID going to look like? So maybe we could just get started on the role of HR. How has the role of HR changed in this environment, both globally across industries and specifically for OC Tanner?
I can speak personally, and just because we work with so many HR contacts, because that's typically the group that we partner with on a lot of these change and strategic initiatives that OC Tanner's clients are trying to implement. But it's interesting because I think historically HR has been a partner to business in trying to accomplish, the strategies of the business, and increasingly so. It's very important that HR professionals understand the business. How do we make money? Where do we add value from a people perspective? What type of talent do we need to support the strategic goals of the organization, both short-term and long-term? But this has been my first experience where the whole business turns to HR and says, now what? What do we do now? Like, we have I remember being in a meeting, I think it was March 11th or 12th this year. It was 2 days before we made the decision to go to work from home. And our CEO and I were whiteboarding, and he said, we've got 2 priorities: the safety of our people and the health of our business. And people were absolutely first. And I hope that that's been your experience in your organizations as well. But those were our priorities, right? That was not only the CEO's priority, but my priority. And so as we became more and more in lockstep about making decisions that funneled up to those 2 priorities, there was a lot of pressure put on HR teams to know what to do in an unprecedented circumstance. And so as our whole team got voracious about learning, okay, what is this? What's the smart thing to do? We didn't want to overreact. We didn't want to underreact, but we wanted to make sure that we preserve those 2 priorities of the safety of our people and the health of our business. And we just became very transparent with our people about, this is what we know right now. This is what we think is best right now. We don't know all the right things to do, but we believe the next right thing to do is this, and that's what we're going to do because we are being guided by these two principles. And so I think that going forward, I don't know that there has ever been a year where my CEO and my relationship has been closer and more dependent on achieving goals together. And we work well together before this, but it has been a true partnership. And I think it's an opportunity going forward to use this connection that has been so necessary and forced because of the circumstances we're in to really continue at a high level of support for the strategic needs of the business. And I hope that that's what we will see from HR leaders everywhere. And I also hope that people have turned to their human resource teams for needs that maybe they didn't turn to before. You know, I can say at OC Tanner, we've had a lot more discussions about physical needs or mental health, or, you know, what does working from home look like? How do we share space? We understand that you're under a new and intense and a different type of stress than you've experienced before. How do we offer support for that? And so the conversation between our people and our team has become very intimate very quickly about really wanting to open access to what may have felt like more of an unnecessary conversation, or somebody said, you know, I'm worried about this, but I'm not sure I'm ready to talk to somebody at work about it, to the point where we're just in each other's lives. And if we thought technology had blurred the lines between work and home before, there's almost no gray area left. Like, it's just all in the soup. So we've been adding a lot of resources that way and really reimagining our roles on the People and Great Work team at OC Tanner differently. We have to reimagine what it is that we offer to our people because the support that they need has changed. Alex, what do you see in the research on that? How is it changing HR globally?
Well, you know, a lot of what you have just reflected on and shared is very similar to what we're seeing globally. We're seeing a lot of HR stakeholders report kind of an increased need from the business to consult. I think the business is always known, and I think most businesses really appreciate their HR function. But I think they've always appreciated that function from a tactical perspective, from an execution perspective. What we're seeing is that HR has a larger seat at the table, and that it's being sought after for strategic guidance, not just tactical execution. I think that's going to be critical. I think the pandemic has really changed the way that we look at our employee populations. I think instead of seeing them simply as human capital, which I hate that word, it's a very impersonal word, they're starting to see them as humans. And we're starting to see how all of these things work together and how they're truly necessary for the success of any business. And so these culture initiatives, these different types of recognition initiatives, employee experience initiatives that may have struggled to kind of get that strategic attention at the C-suite level, we're starting to see a shift where those become important because people need them to be successful. And we know that when people are successful, typically the business also realizes quite a degree of success. So that's one sentiment that I thought I'd share. The other that I thought was really interesting in HR's role in it is this idea of safety. Now, you know, I think pre-pandemic, most of the time when I talked about safety, when I asked stakeholders about safety, it came down to workers' comp claims and incidences, and you know, illnesses were typically never an issue. We didn't think about our policies in the context of a pandemic. And this has really shown a light on the fact that safety is more than just workers' comp claims. It's more than just incidents. It's pretty holistic, and it includes the physical and mental well-being of employees, as well as those kind of physical aspects within the workplace that can hurt them. And so I think that's really interesting because HR needs to start really coming to the table and looking at safety from a different lens. I think they have already. I think in the next year to 2 years, and we'll get into that probably later, that will be very important. So those would be the two things that I'd offer from the research.
That's all super interesting. And OC Tanner produces a global culture reports, I think it's what it's called. And I guess that's where we could find all of this information. Now, every year you publish this report. A lot of the things that you discussed are kind of new themes. I mean, of all the things that you've been looking at before, some may have been recurring themes year over year. Are any of those more relevant today than they ever were before?
That is really such a great question. So to give everybody a little bit of background, the Global Culture Report we launched back in 2017 with our inaugural study around workplace culture. And what we found is there's 6 kind of key essential elements of culture that really help employees thrive at work. Those things are purpose, opportunity, success, appreciation, well-being, and leadership. And our reports go into detail, and we don't have time to go through that today. But those reports every year, we kind of recomplete a large study. This past report had 40,000 employee and leader perspectives across 20 countries. So it was a pretty broad global piece of research. What was really interesting, and I promise I will get to the actual question. What was really interesting is we did a lot of also pulse surveys throughout the year when COVID sort of began within the United States, within Australia, within the UK, within Canada, within India. And we found that there are a couple of things that we've been talking about for quite a while that became incredibly important. It was interesting. These best practices in normal times became almost critical practices in a crisis, in a time of crisis. So there's a couple that really have come out as incredibly important. And I'll talk about it from an HR perspective, but I'll also talk about it from a leader perspective. Many people on here are already leaders or maybe an aspiring leader. And I want to give you a little bit of insight there too. So the first is around recognition. Now, OC Tanner has been researching recognition for many, many years, and it's probably not a surprise that we love to talk about recognition. But what we found is that recognition was really incredible, especially in a time of crisis, because people want to feel valued for what they bring, and oftentimes they're stepping up far more than they ever have before. They need to be appreciated by the organization, by their leaders, by their peers. And so having a consistent recognition strategy that spans the organization, that all have access to, and ensuring that that is regularly used was transformative. The organizations that had that strategy in place saw significant gains in engagement. In a time of crisis, people were more engaged. They were more connected to culture. They suffered less burnout. That's really critical. For organizations that didn't have that structure in place, but tried to put that structure in place, they didn't do as well as those first organizations, but they were still able to maintain sort of a status quo. And then there were organizations that, kind of closed those recognition programs down. That strategy was kind of put on hold from a budget perspective. And I understand that budgets can be really tight, but what we found is that had a severe effect on disengagement. It had a severe effect on people's well-being. And that's something that we should consider. So from a recognition standpoint, we used to say that employees needed to be recognized at least every 30 days. That was kind of a hygiene factor. If you were recognized at least every 30 days, then that employee was more likely to be engaged and less likely to attract from the organization. But we found that in COVID times and in kind of a year of crisis, that moved up to a need for recognition once every 7 days, as people were faced and shouldered a greater burden across the organization. They needed to be reminded that they were valued. And so organizations need to really reconsider that and ensure that their strategies that have been put in place are designed to be able to deliver those experiences at least at a weekly level, if not more. Now, the other one that I'll share, and then Mindi, I'd really love your perspective on how things have changed just from a practitioner world, is around leadership. Now, if you look, the literature on leadership and why leadership needs to change, well, that's actually been around for a very long time. And a lot of leadership research that we see today is very much recycled from previous kind of eras of leadership research. One interesting thing that we found last year that has really become I don't know what I'm saying there, just really high importance, is this dichotomy between more of a traditional leadership style, which is more directive, more evaluative, more about gatekeeping and territory control, to modern leaders that focused on advocating and mentoring employees and connecting them to different people. That was critical last year, and what we found this year, organizations that had greater proportions of modern leaders had a greater chance of having a highly engaged workforce, even in times of crisis. They also had more innovative ideas, which crisis has a lot of negative effects, but it typically pushes organizations to be more innovative. And organizations led by modern leaders had more innovation and great work happening. And so as we start to think about, how do we prepare for the next, year or two, it's really about how do we adopt those modern leadership practices? How do we connect employees to purpose, to their accomplishments, and to one another so that they can thrive and that we enable that rather than constraining their what they could do. Mindi?
Yeah, and I just love this topic of leadership because I think it really is the crux of culture. I think HR teams can do a lot to set the tone in an organization, to provide the right benefits, to make it a great place to work. But our primary function is to support frontline leaders as they deliver a daily experience to their team members. And that is something that, everything that we do as a team is meant to support frontline leadership, because there's no way that I can implement a program, a bonus, a party, a tradition, whatever it is that will make up for a terrible day-to-day experience for a team member with their leader, right? Like you cannot make up for that. And so we want our leaders to understand the responsibility that they have to the employee experience. And as a leader, it's fantastic whatever skills got you noticed and elevated you within a team, and then provided you the opportunity to become a leader. But at that moment that you accept that title and that role, the responsibility is the employee experience. And so just creating that mind shift and making sure that leadership understands their role in the organization, and again, connecting people to the principles of what makes somewhere a great place to work, as Alex talked about, to purpose, to opportunities, to success. We had to acknowledge the fact that the way that our frontline leaders delivered that experience changed in an instant. They didn't have training for how to do that remotely. We didn't have, it's not something that we had anticipated going into. So I would say right off the bat, the first thing that we let people know is if your job for the first few weeks and, onward is to listen. Like, you have to understand what's going on with your teams. And I think the inclination, at least at first, when we went to, fully remote meetings and Zoom and virtual, was you get on the call, everybody assembles, we dive into the agenda, it's business, 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 I'm on to the next call. And that's not how it happens when we're face to face, right? We're gathering, we're chatting, we're laughing, we kind of settle in, and then the meeting begins. Well, people were really feeling a vacuum from that social interaction, that piece of the meeting that really satisfied part of that employee experience. And so whether or not you have to build that in with some type of a out of context question at the beginning of a meeting, or a conversation starter, or something funny, or just have a leader say, start with something that's more casual to sort of set the tone of, hey, we're here, we're okay, we're still just a team, we're a bunch of people, what do you want to talk about? What was the best thing from last week? What's going on? What is that weird picture in the background? Or who is the kid that just walked into the meeting? Like, tell us about that and let's connect. And so those one-on-ones became more and more critical to us. And I will say that Alex's culture report has given us a gift in the last year, in the fact that in traditional HR training, we learn about sort of the employee stages. We're going to attract employees, we're going to recruit them, we're going to onboard them, we're going to develop them, then we're going to, separate, right? Like, there's this retirement. which is fine for us thinking through operationally, like what we need to do to support employees in each stage. But if you ask an employee, you know, how are you doing? What's work like? They're not like, well, I'm in the onboarding stage, or I am being recruited. That's not how they think about it. They have just had an experience with the organization. And so this mind shift from an employee life cycle to the employee experience being a collection of these micro moments, these micro experiences, really helps break down sort of this bigger picture. I think that sometimes we can get overwhelmed with. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to help you feel more normal. I don't know how to help you feel more connected. But I know that if I sent you a note in the mail, or dropped off a treat on your doorstep, or asked for just some extra one-on-one time with you so that we could talk about something that wasn't work related, that creates a micro experience that deepens connection. And people more than ever are craving that type of experience. And it's not artificial. It has to be authentic, right? It has to come from the heart. It has to be aligned to who you are as a person, as a leader, and you have to know the employee too. So what you might do for one member on your team might seem totally strange to another, but because you've taken the time to have those one-on-one conversations with them, you know kind of what makes each person tick. And I would just, you know, if any organization, I don't know at this point if any organization is saying, hey, we're just going to go on hold for a moment until this thing is over. We're so past that. But just doing those small things adds up to some big impact in the way that people feel about who they work with, the work that they're doing, and the team that they're on. And I would, if you haven't taken the time to do that as a leader, I would just challenge you to take that on. It's well worth your time, and it puts people in a headspace and in a trust space that their productivity is enhanced, their innovation is enhanced, their permission to add the value that only they can add as a member of your team is really brought to the fore.
I think that's so definitely so critical. That this whole, I mean, it's almost shocking that the amount of communication and listening that we have to do now. I mean, it's just gone to a different level, and I don't think that everyone's there necessarily understanding how critical that is. But we all crave communication. We all crave connections, but it's just trying to figure out how to do it in this new space is definitely a challenge.
Well, and Deborah, can I just add, don't overthink it. Like, it doesn't have to be with the beautiful header and the glossy thing and edited by the best writer in your company. We stumbled very accidentally on a practice that has become, it's become important to many people in our organization. And that was just starting March 13th or whenever it was, Alex, we ended up quite accidentally sending out a daily email from myself and our CEO. We co-authored an email about, here's what we know today. Here's what you need to know. Here's how we're doing as a business. Here's how how many clients we've heard from. Here's what the plan is for next week or tomorrow or this afternoon. Well, I don't know how many messages into it we are, but I think it's 300 or something days later, and we're still writing one every single day. And it has spanned from tactical to philosophical to pictures from vacations or families. And what I know is that whether or not every single person has found every single message inspiring or informative, I have no idea. But at least one person every day we hear from who said, I needed to hear that, or I feel more connected, or now I understand. And it seems counterintuitive, but I truly believe we were close before, but we are connected now. And that is something that is going to be a benefit that we take from this experience forward as an organization.
Absolutely. And like you said, I mean, we're actually, I mean, almost sharing more than we ever would have shared. You know, the kids in the background, the pets crawling across the screen.
It's humanized work in such a different way.
Absolutely. I mean, and leaders have that added responsibility, though, of making sure that they are making these connections, that they are humanizing the whole experience even more, and being careful about these smaller moments that you mentioned. And I imagine, and of course, it depends on whether you're working from home and there are people that are still going to the office. And Mindi, you mentioned you have this hybrid type of work environment. And I think one of the biggest things that maybe as leaders, people are concerned about is productivity. It's changed. Things have changed for everyone, even those that are still going into the office just as much as for those that are at home. So can you talk a little bit about productivity and how maybe productivity is impacted through HR in both of those different environments?
Yeah, no problem. I think the first step that we took toward just enabling productivity was the fact that, forever before COVID, we had some people that would take work from home days, but we didn't really have a regular sort of work from home workforce. But when we decided to make the move home, this panic was, how are we going to get everyone a laptop and this and that? And we just looked at each other and said, let them take what's at their desk. Like, we have the equipment. We've never wanted it to leave the building before, but this makes sense. And so just taking more of that common sense approach of, let's get people set up to be successful wherever it is they need to work. Do you need your desk? Do you need your chair? How can we help you cart your monitors out to your car? So that was kind of like the first very, very basic wave of that. And I would say for those that have site dependent work at OC Tanner, our manufacturing teams, we let them know that prioritizing their safety meant that those of us who did not need to be in the building were going to minimize the risk of their exposure to COVID by not being there. This didn't mean, hey, see you later, good luck. It meant, we're going to put a bubble around those of you who have site dependent work. We're going to put all kinds of safety measures in place. We're going to make sure you don't have to go out to get food and to eat. We're going to provide breakfast and lunches. We're going to make sure that you've got the support that you need to be safe when you're at work. And that felt supportive on both sides, right? Like we had people who could work from home, so you should. We had people who couldn't, so let's make this as safe as possible for you to be here. And that's been a model that's worked well for us. The other thing that I would say about productivity is our concerns. Yes, we've had people that are having a hard time managing the kids at home and the spouse at home, and they're in a small apartment, and I don't know how to do this. So we just have very candid conversations about, let's come up with a strategy. What hours would work best for you? How do we tackle this? But I truly believe in individualizing those approaches. Like I don't know how you can have a department of 200, 300 or 3,000 people and say everybody must. Because when we talk about fairness doesn't mean everything being the same, right? Sometimes we have to recognize that people are in different situations. And so for them to be able to deliver the value that we've hired them to deliver to the business, we may need to open our minds about how and when they deliver that value. On the converse of that, my biggest concern right now is that people are working more. People are never off. That there is this, I'll just get started, or I see the computer and I know so-and-so is going to email me back, and, India's up now, so we've got to check this. And I've got people I just know are putting in 10, 12, 14-hour days regularly. And so we sent a message out to our organization, gosh, Alex, what was it, 4 to 6 weeks ago, where our CEO just said, enough, like enough. There has to be a time where you've got to breathe, because we need you and we're going to burn you out if this is how we continue. So guess what? Meetings are 55 minutes long. We're not going 60 to 60 to 60. Like at some point you have to breathe, take a drink of water, and walk around for 10 seconds. And that's what we used to do when we went between conference rooms. But on Zoom, it's just boom, boom, boom. So just even having that come from him to say, I see you, we appreciate what you're doing, and it's not sustainable, and we want you for the long term. And that's where this leadership and well-being and appreciation, like those dynamics really meshed for our people. And there was such an outpouring of, like this relief of, it's okay for me to go back to a more normalized schedule.
Yeah, I think, I'll just add 2 points to that from a research perspective. Well, one is this idea that we found that productivity is kind of fluid, and productivity doesn't look the same on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's something that people need to come to terms with. I think we've been taught for a very long time that productive employees look like this. In highly operationalized roles, it's even more so. You are on the floor, on the phone from X to time to X time, then you can have a 10-minute break, and then you're back there. So you have kind of one set of workers there, where productivity needs to be reconsidered. It could be equally productive to take them off the floor, off the production floor, and allow them to access on-site mental health care services that can help reboot and recharge, or to have an on-site nurse that can help them with a medical issue, right? That could be equally productive to having them on the phone for 30 more minutes, because it helps them return back to work in a more productive fashion. So I think, for our site-dependent workers and operationalized workforces, that's just one thing to consider. For our work from home, workforces, I think HR needs to reconsider some of our policies. During the height of the pandemic, we did a lot of research on policy and those kind of collisions with unfairness. And I'll give you a really good example that really gets at what Mindi said, which there was an employee that was brand new to her organization. She had been there for about 3 months. They had a policy that an employee that hasn't been there for a year does not receive a reimbursement for any work at home expenses, like a desk, like a chair. And so this employee, who had been previously unemployed, so had really exhausted her savings, wasn't able to afford a new desk, a new chair. All her coworkers were able to afford a new desk and a new chair. So that policy kind of collided with an external incident that really had a dramatic impact on her employee experience and her perception of that organization's culture. Fairness in that regard would probably be alleviating that concern and making an exception to that policy. And so I think our research indicates that HR needs to really reconsider policies, adding a little bit of autonomy in. I know that's kind of scary, but leaders, if we're going to have them be modern leaders and to be able to shift to the needs of their employees to help them be their most productive, person, they need to have some flexibility and autonomy to do so.
I really love this whole idea. I mean, everything that you guys have said is, it depends, and it depends on who you're dealing with. It depends on a lot of things. So this approach of thinking about people individually, and the approach should be more individual than sort of, big and broad and kind of one size fits all. That makes total sense. And I'm thinking about that in terms of onboarding, and everybody's experience, and having those experience, everybody's going to kind of feel differently about it. Some people are really thriving in work from home environments. They love sort of this more distanced approach, but other people really miss it. And so what's the role of onboarding these days, and how can you make that experience, or how have you guys made that experience, or have you consulted to companies to make that experience more normal for people, if you will?
It's a hard time to start at a new organization, because usually you're meeting people as you're walking with the one person you're meeting the 10 people in the hallway that they're stopping to introduce you to. And so somehow we have to recreate that virtually and remotely. For us, I can tell you, we just onboarded a new compensation manager in our team. And so this is very dear to us. And, the few dozen employees that we have hired this year, even as, many employers are experiencing some sort of slowdown with hiring. We anticipate a return to workplace. And so for us, part of the strategy with onboarding is not just delivering the information and making sure people meet enough people virtually to feel included in the organization. We've had great engagement from our senior leadership team. We've had great engagement through the practice of huddles that are regular for us to have new people drop into virtual huddles so that they can at least understand names and faces. And so that's been helpful. But one thing that we've done, because we have this expectation that we will return to workplace, is we have asked hiring leaders to bring their new hires in, to arrange a time to bring them to the workplace, to give them a tour, following all the safety protocol, but they need to understand the different types of work that get done in our company in order to understand who we are. And when they receive these messages, to understand the different operating groups. We want to make sure that they participate in some of the perks that will be theirs when they return to the office. So we have our chef prepare a meal for them to take home with them at the end of that site visit. And that's something that makes a real impact on the new hires that we've had this year of, wow, I feel not only cared for, but I'm excited to return to the workplace at some point and experience this daily. I think another thing to be really mindful of is the fact that onboarding starts the moment that you post a job position. So the language that you're using, how you're introducing yourself as a company will determine the type of candidates that you get to apply. And we certainly start people experiencing our culture, not only from the posting, but that interview process. Once we're down to our final candidates, there are letters that go to the home. There's a lot of outreach from the team. Every team makes sure to send a personal note, handwritten note to the new team member. And those are those micro experiences again, that somebody goes to their mailbox and they say, who's this? Oh my gosh, like I didn't expect it. And so whatever you can do that is something, connecting, that recognizes the fact that this is a person who is nervous about joining at a time that is unconventional. They don't know anybody, and all of those considerations that we would be very mindful of in person are still very, very real. And so we have to satisfy those in some way. And I don't know what's right for every organization, but those are a few of the practices that have been helpful for us. What would you add, Alex?
I think one thing is very clear from our research, in that onboarding is not finished until an employee chooses to engage with the organization. So you might have an onboarding program, right? And maybe that program is 4 weeks long and it has these different touch points and experiences, and those are truly wonderful, but it really doesn't, it doesn't end until the employee has a good sense of purpose at the organization and can connect to what the organization does, its reason for being, sees the opportunities available to them, sees their success or what could be their success and how they can reach it. They feel appreciated for what they've already brought to the table and who they are. They have a sense of well-being, and they have a leader that is extraordinary. When you have all those things right, onboarding is generally finished because people are choosing to bring their best self to work. They're choosing to give their discretionary effort and not just the bare minimum. That's when onboarding should end, or kind of ends and goes into this other phase of being at an organization. And as Mindi mentioned, that starts right at the job posting, and that's critical. That's critical. Our research really indicates that there's ways that you can add little experiences, little cultural experiences throughout everything, add that little cultural flavor to help support all those 6 different elements right from the beginning. It eases yourself just in a normal time. It eases people into onboarding and success sooner. And in a very disconnected world, in a lot of ways, it helps kind of ease the burden of those that are onboarding and the onboardee, if that's I think I made up a word, but
Oh, that's funny. I had not thought of that. This whole concept of from posting. I mean, that's where the onboarding starts. I'm going to pay more attention to job postings now. I think it makes total sense, though. I think you're absolutely right. And if people aren't doing it, they definitely should, kind of put in that flair of the company culture. So we've talked about a lot of different things, and you guys deal with a lot of different companies. And you've talked to us a lot about what OC Tanner is doing in particular. Would you give us some examples of companies that you work with that are kind of doing this whole COVID world thing well, and maybe what they're doing specifically?
Oh my gosh, that's such a fun question, because organizations are being so creative right now, and we're so thrilled to be in partnership with so many. I can tell you when Alex was sharing those statistics about one, and the sort of the basic human need to be recognized once every 30 days, and then in crisis once every 7. We work with an exceptional healthcare client, a New York Presbyterian, who was just in the middle, as you know, of the epicenter of COVID in New York City at the very onset of the pandemic. And instead of sort of shutting everything down and getting really quiet everywhere so that the nurses and doctors could do their jobs, their HR team really rallied to say, this is when our people need us the most. And instead of once every 7 days, because our people are living crisis, that was their minimum, because their people live crisis every day, right? Like they're in high stress situations every day. They said, our goal is to make sure that every healthcare provider receives appreciation or recognition at least once every 7 hours. And so isn't that incredible? And you would think, oh my gosh, maybe that's overkill. It was like oxygen to this workforce that was in complete chaos and trauma. And just to be able to partner with them, we did some frontline hero awards with them. We helped them with some e-cards that they made sure were filled up their providers' inboxes, so that when they went to do some of the administrative aspects of their job, there was appreciation there for them. Our employees, I'm going to get a little bit emotional, but our employees wrote thank you notes and sent them to our contacts at these healthcare providers. We were privileged to be able to manufacture and donate some face shields that were so desperately needed, that PPE that was non-existent at the beginning of the pandemic. And I'm proud of our company for doing that. But the special sauce on top of that was the thank you notes that went inside every package of those face shields. And so we got pictures back from our clients where they had taken those thank you notes and lined the halls of the hospital with, and these were things that our employees worked on with their children and their families. And just the fact that even though we couldn't all be on site to actually construct something, we could all add value to that effort. And so when you think about a hospital and you think about the priorities that they had in those moments, where they are literally in life and death situations, what rose to the top was this focus on employee experience. How do we support the people that are supporting the public? And it was just such a beautiful mindset example of, this is not hunker down. This is not wait till this is over. This is not get real quiet and let your people do their jobs. This is how they are going to excel and continue to bring the energy that you need to deliver great work. And there's examples of that across multiple industries, airlines that we work with who have taken, this opportunity to really just show appreciation, even as they've had to make tough decisions with early retirements or layoffs. But how do we show who we are? Because not only do we want to give these people a send-off worthy of the contribution that they've made when they're at our organization, but how we go about this sends a message to everybody that is still here about what we believe is the value of people. And so to work with clients that get that it's not just about honoring those that are leaving or those that are in the middle of the crisis, but it's also about those employees that are watching you and going, do they walk the talk? Are they thoughtful? Are those things that they taught me in onboarding being practiced? That's been an honor to see among so many of our clients.
That's such a great story. And I that goes back to your statement before about we're actually more connected. And I think that those situations like that, it just, you do feel more connected to people. Because I know my kids are writing thank you notes all the time, and we're doing it also at work. And you just feel this sense of gratitude for the people that are out there, even more in the thick of things during this time.
It relieves some of that sense of helplessness too.
Yes.
I mean, we all say, what can I do? And we think it has to be big. It just needs to be something that helps focus our energy in a positive way.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a bunch more questions, but we're starting to get to that time. So I definitely want to open it up to our audience to ask some. And I think we've got our first one here. Let's see. Tracy asks, what types of recognition programs do you have that specifically focus on employees that are working from home or offsite?
So because most of our recognition is done on a software platform, we are able to electronically send notes of recognition, nominations that are equated to, sometimes equated to point levels that employees then accumulate in a virtual way and then can go on and have an online catalog or shopping experience where they redeem those points. One thing that has been great, and we actually saw a big uptick in recognition as we came home, is the fact that when you have recognition that is done in a systematic way and has a platform as a home, it gives leadership visibility to the work that's being done. And so instead of being able to look across the office and say, well, they look really busy today, I'm going to go ask them what they're doing. When I see an e-card or a nomination being sent, I'm being copied on something that a peer or someone from another department is recognizing as great work that they've done that I cannot physically see right now because we're not in the same space. I have an awareness of what my team members are delivering to the organization, and I can then comment on that or seek more information, or hey, is that something that we should be taking organization wide? And so because we operate from a cloud-based platform, it just gives visibility to everyone. And it also, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. You know, our colleagues are connected by that system.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember my first physical recognition gift was a bracelet.
Mm-hmm.
the 5-year kind of thank you for your contributions. After 5 years, you get a bracelet.
Well, and what that bracelet may or may not be significant, but it's the memory that it evokes, yeah. Right? And yeah. Every time you put it on and think about it, there's a
that is
smile.
true.
I can see that. Yes,
that's true.
And we have. Oh, sorry. Go.
No, go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to say there, you know, one additional thing is that a lot of organizations are kind of reassessing some of these symbolic pieces and going away from some of these kind of normal, like it's a silver, you know, level, or it's a gold level, or it's a, you know, gemstone of some type, and starting to reconsider their company's story and their company's history and the symbolism in all of that, and then reshaping pieces to really fit that kind of story. And so an employee kind of experiences these cultural milestones along their own journey with the organization, and that's been kind of a fun way to kind of reinvent that and still make it really symbolic and meaningful.
Absolutely. All right, Darren is asking a question that I actually had on my list too, and that was, you know, the future of, like, what's next? You know, what are HR folks doing to help organizations prepare to return to work post-COVID?
Mm-hmm. Well, that is, I always say we've got a great plan with no deadline. So, you know, we've been thinking about this for months, and I cannot wait to, you know, welcome people back to a choice of workplace. I mean, at this point, we're kind of we're being forced into some different safety measures that determine where we work. But if I had to say, you know, the biggest difference going forward, we definitely need to welcome people back to workplace. And that's been a big distinction that I wanted to make with my organization. People have been working. Like, let's make no mistake about the language that we're using. It's not welcome back to work, right? Because everybody's going to go, I've been working pretty dang hard for the last year, so I don't know what you're talking about. But welcome back to workplace. And, you know, this discussion about why workplace matters. And we have this theme that we're rallying around with our welcome back around being together again. And what does that mean? And how do we create experiences around that? But I think it is inevitable that the idea of workplace has been changed forever and globally. So, you know, whether or not it becomes necessary to hop on a plane for that really critical meeting, or whether or not, you know, people are going to give each other 2 or 3 days of their life back to do a Zoom call, I cannot see the argument and the pendulum swinging so hard the other way that we're back into exactly the lifestyle and work style that we had been living for so many decades previous. Organizations like ours are trying to figure out what work from home looks like. What does a flexible schedule look like? What kind of opportunities does that provide us? What's the minimum that we want to have people in the office so that we can still experience this togetherness and this sense of place that contributes to our sense of culture? So I think You know, organizations are going to have to figure out what's right for them based on their workforce needs, the specialized nature of their jobs, the work that needs to be done. But it's true that I don't believe that we will ever have another meeting with somebody on a conference call rather than a virtual screen, right? Them struggling to figure out who's talking or what's going on. And that's a big leap forward for inclusiveness, geographical inclusiveness. I'm excited about that and what that means, at least for OC Tanner.
Perfect. All right, so we're getting down to the wire here. We're going to close with, well, first, before I close with this question, I want to thank you guys. It's been so great having you. Love the insights. I've learned a bunch. Let's see. Here we go. How has COVID impacted the HR job market? Okay, this is a question near and dear to my heart because I work with students and trying to find them positions. And so for those interested in going into this area, what are the key strengths that HR professionals need to possess to be successful in HR today?
Well, I will tell you, the next hire I make into my team, I am going to be hungry for flexibility, adaptivity, creativity. Can you reimagine a function that you've been trained to do? And again, the question I always ask, and really the only question that matters in any job interview, how are you going to deliver value to the organization, right? What unique value can you bring to my team and to this business? And so I would just encourage anyone who's looking to become to start into the HR field or become an HR professional. One, you have to understand business. You have to understand why the business exists, how it makes money, what the supply chain looks like, what jobs are critical to the organization. You have to understand how to support the operational aspect of the business. And you have to be strong in strategy. HR operations is becoming more and more automated. And the real value that a people team adds is this experience, this experiential, how can you help us differentiate as an employer so that we can add more value to the business through our people? And so if you come in with a mindset like that and some creative ideas about hybrid workplace, or how you can reimagine a function that has been done in a traditional way, you're going to instantly add some value. What would you say, Alex?
I would say the number one skill I would say that everybody should focus on is data literacy. We now live in a data-driven world. Whether we want it to be that way or not, it's here, right? And being able to understand the basics of data and what that means to the business and how to use HR data to actually enrich business strategy and ensure that people perspective is represented and represented accurately. That's a critical skill, and that's a skill that will set people apart. So whether if you're new to HR, get that, get on that, get that skill on your resume. And if you're seasoned, take a class, go just have fun with it. And don't be scared about data. Don't be scared about statistics. I promise you, it's not that scary, and it will add value, not only to you, but to the business.
Thank you so much. We're so proud to have you both as alumni of the U, and love having you guys. And thanks so much. And I'm going to turn it back to Chelsea.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate the time that our panelists and our moderator put into this discussion. Please join us tomorrow for a discussion on the future of hospitality and tourism. You can RSVP at eccles.link/roadtrip. Also, please save the date for our next Eccles Alumni Forum on January 28th. It's the business of sports. If you're thinking about making an end of year gift, now is a great time to do that to help support our Eccles School students. Please visit eccles.link/cares to make a tax deductible gift. Thank you again, and thank you to our sponsor, OC Tanner.